At our Sunday family dinner, in the middle of the roast chicken and cornbread, the lawyer cleared his throat and said my brother was inheriting Dad's Texas mansion, worth over $1 million. The whole table cheered like it was a football game. I just sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, until Mr. Callahan turned to me with a second envelope, my name scribbled on the front, and that's when the room went dead quiet. Truth is, I always knew Mark was the favorite. Growing up in our small Texas town, Dad treated him like the golden boy. He was the quarterback in high school, the one who got the new F-150 when he turned 18, the one Dad bragged about to every neighbor at the feed store. Me? I was the quiet one, the kid who fixed fences, patched the roof, and drove the beat-up Silverado Dad passed down when it barely ran. But even knowing all that, hearing those words, "The mansion goes to Mark," felt like a punch straight to the gut. That mansion wasn't just a house. It was red brick with white columns, sitting on 20 acres of land off Highway 79. It had the wide front porch where Dad taught me how to whittle a piece of cedar on summer evenings, the dining room with the heavy oak table that weighed more than my first truck, and the upstairs bedroom where Mom would hum old country songs when she tucked us in. It was more than walls. It was history, and just like that, it was his. Mark stood up like he'd just been crowned king of Texas. He raised his glass of sweet tea, grinned wide, and said, "Guess Dad knew who could handle it." My aunts clapped. My cousins whispered. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I just stared down at my plate, at the grease stains spreading from the fried chicken, my throat too tight to swallow. You ever been surrounded by family and felt like a stranger in your own bloodline? That's exactly what it felt like. Then came the moment no one expected. Mr. Callahan, the lawyer who'd been handling Dad's affairs for 30 years, cleared his throat again. The sound cut through the laughter. He reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a smaller envelope, cream-colored, edges bent, like it had been handled too many times. He set it on the table right in front of me. My name, written in Dad's shaky handwriting, stared back at me. My hands went cold. The room shifted. Forks stopped clinking. Chairs creaked as people leaned in. Mark snorted. "What's this? A sympathy card?" A few cousins chuckled, but Mr. Callahan didn't smile. His pale blue eyes fixed on me, steady, like he was daring me to open it. Mom whispered my name, soft and broken. I picked it up, and the texture of the paper felt rough against my sweaty palms. My chest pounded so hard I thought the whole table could hear it. I didn't open it right away. Truth is, I was scared. Scared it would be empty. Scared it'd be a cruel reminder that I was never enough. My brother leaned closer, the smell of his cologne, that strong musky scent he always wore, making me nauseous. "Go on, little brother. Show us what Daddy left you. Maybe a set of tools. Maybe a pocket knife if you're lucky." I gritted my teeth, my mind flashing back to every moment Dad chose him over me. The fishing trip where I caught the biggest bass, but Dad told everyone Mark's was better. The county fair when I fixed the tractor engine, but Mark got the credit. The way Dad's eyes always lit up for him and went dim for me. The envelope trembled in my hands. The clock on the wall ticked past 7:42 p.m. Outside, I could hear the cicadas buzzing in the warm Texas night. Inside, you could have heard a pin drop. Finally, I slid my finger under the flap. The tearing sound seemed to echo louder than the laughter earlier. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and something small that clinked against the plate in front of me. A brass key, old and worn. My breath caught. The note was short, written in Dad's uneven scrawl. My hand shook as I read the first line. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a token. It was a message. One my brother wasn't meant to see. I just stared at that brass key resting on the plate, catching the yellow glow of the chandelier above, and for a moment it didn't make sense. A key? To what? Mark laughed so loud the silverware rattled. That's it? A rusty key and a piece of paper? Guess Dad knew who the real man of the house was. Everyone chuckled nervously, trying to read the lawyer's face, but Mr. Callahan just folded his hands and said, "That's all the will requires me to share at this time." My stomach turned. I folded the note without letting anyone else see and slipped the key into my pocket, my hand tightening around the cold metal like it might anchor me. Truth is, I was shaking inside, but I didn't want to give Mark the satisfaction of seeing me weak. As the family drifted into chatter about how Mark would redecorate the mansion, new pool, tearing down Dad's old shed, maybe even selling the land, I drifted back into my own head, and the memories started pouring in whether I wanted them to or not. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting on the back porch of that same mansion, the Texas sun setting fire orange over the mesquite trees. Dad handed Mark a brand new football, still smelling of leather, and told him, "Son, you're going to lead this family one day." He turned to me, sitting right there with scraped knees and calloused hands from helping him mend fences, and all he said was, "Go fetch us some iced tea." That's how it always was. Mark got the speeches, the promises, the spotlight. I got the chores. You ever grow up feeling like an extra in your own family story? That's me. I remember another time, Christmas morning, 1998. Mark unwrapped a shiny red bike with chrome handlebars, worth at least $200 at the local shop. My gift? A second-hand pocket knife with Dad's initials carved in, blade already dull. Don't get me wrong, I still loved it. I carried that knife everywhere, cut twine with it, whittled sticks out back. But even as a kid, I knew what it meant. He was the chosen one. I was the shadow. And yet, every once in a while, Dad would look at me with this strange intensity, like he was seeing something no one else did. One night when I was 17, we sat out by the barn after a long day hauling hay. It was late. I remember because the crickets were loud, and the old Timex on his wrist read 11:23 p.m. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the humid air, and said, "One day, you'll understand why I do things the way I do." I frowned, asked him what he meant.
But he just shook his head and said, "Not now."
Not yet. That line burned into me, stuck in my ribs for years, and now, holding that brass key, it came roaring back like a freight train. What if this was it? What if the note in my pocket was connected to that night, to all the little ways he treated me different? Not better, but different. Mark used to boast that Dad trusted him with everything, the money, the business, the future. But what if Dad had trusted me with something else? Something he couldn't tell anyone else about? The thought made me dizzy. My family kept eating, plates clinking, laughter forced. Mom wouldn't look at me. She just kept dabbing her eyes, the lace of her handkerchief already damp. And that broke me a little, because part of me wondered if she knew all along. Did she know what was in that envelope? Did she know why Dad left me this key? Or was she just as in the dark as I was? Meanwhile, Mark strutted around the table like he owned not just the mansion but the whole damn family. He slapped Uncle Ray on the back, bragging about how he'd host Christmas in the newly renovated great room. I could practically see Dad's ghost shaking his head at the thought of those wood-paneled walls being painted over. My fists clenched under the table. I wanted to stand up, to scream that the story wasn't over, that maybe Dad had one last card up his sleeve. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat quiet, replaying every memory that suddenly seemed like a clue. The times Dad would take me along to the feed store, leaving Mark at home. The way he'd ask me to balance the ledger for the ranch expenses when I was just 14, even though Mark was older. The way he once handed me a set of old maps of our land, telling me, "Keep these safe. They'll matter someday." At the time, I thought it was just busy work. Now? It felt like the start of a trail I was only just beginning to see. I slipped my hand into my pocket, fingers brushing the rough ridges of that brass key. My brother's laughter faded into a hum. My mind was back on that barn night, on Dad's gravelly voice saying, "One day you'll understand." And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd been talking about this moment all along. I waited until the plates were cleared and most of the noise in the room died down before I unfolded the note. My hands were sweating and the paper was already crinkled from my grip. The handwriting was jagged, each letter uneven, like Dad had written it during one of his bad days when his hands shook from the medication. I held my breath and started reading, and the first line nearly made me drop it. "Son, if you're holding this, it means I trusted you with something the others don't know about." My throat closed up. Everyone leaned in, trying to peek over my shoulder, but I curled the paper tight against my chest. Mark laughed. "Read it out loud, little brother. Let's all hear what Dad left you. Maybe a chore list?" The cousins chuckled, the sound sharp as knives, but I ignored them. I scanned the next lines. The mansion is just a house. What matters is what's behind the life we built. I left you the key. Use it when you're ready. Trust no one but yourself. That was it. No directions, no map, just those words and the brass key in my pocket. My heart hammered. Trust no one but yourself? Did Dad know this would cause a war? Did he plan for it? The room was watching me like I was holding a winning lottery ticket. I folded the note quickly and shoved it back in my pocket. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Well, what's it say? Don't tell me you're too scared to share." I looked at him, at the smugness plastered across his face, And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt chosen. I said nothing. That made him angrier than if I'd spat in his face. He slammed his glass on the table, tea spilling over the wood. He left you nothing, didn't he? Just scraps. That's all you'll ever be. Scraps. My jaw clenched. Mom flinched at his words, and for a split second our eyes met. She looked like she wanted to say something, but her lips stayed pressed together, trembling. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd seen Dad writing that letter in his study late at night. The tension crackled so thick you could taste it, like the air before a Texas thunderstorm. I stood up, chair scraping hard against the floor. Everyone's heads turned. My palms were slick as I slipped the key out of my pocket, holding it up where the chandelier light caught its tarnished surface. Dad left me this, I said, voice steadier than I expected. The room erupted in whispers. Aunt Linda gasped. Mark barked out a laugh. A key? That's it? What's it for, the outhouse? A couple cousins laughed, but their eyes betrayed curiosity, because deep down, they wanted to know too. Mr. Callahan adjusted his glasses but stayed silent, which told me everything. He knew more than he was saying. The old man never played dumb. I looked around the table, at the roast chicken bones piled on platters, the cornbread crumbs scattered like dust, and thought about how many meals we'd had here pretending we were a family. Truth is, we'd been broken long before tonight. This was just the proof. Mark slammed his fist again, face red. You think some old key means you're special? That house is mine. Everyone knows it. Dad made it clear. I slipped the key back into my pocket, my hand tightening around it. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt like Dad was whispering in my ear, "Don't tell them." Not yet. My silence only fueled the fire. Mark lunged halfway across the table, and Uncle Ray had to hold him back. "Let him play his little game," Ray said. But his eyes flicked toward my pocket, curiosity plain as day. That's when it hit me. The real battle wasn't about the mansion. It was about this key. About whatever Dad left behind that no one else knew about. I sat back down, forcing myself to breathe, forcing my hands to stop shaking. I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking toward 8:05 p.m. Each tick felt like a countdown. The rest of dinner blurred. People whispered, some glaring, some pretending nothing happened. Mom never said another word. Mark stormed out first, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The rest followed slowly, leaving plates half-finished, like no one had an appetite anymore. And me? I stayed seated, the key heavy in my pocket, Dad's words echoing in my head. Trust no one but yourself. When the last chair scraped back and the door clicked shut, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My fingers brushed the ridges of the brass key, and I realized this wasn't just about inheritance. This was a test, a puzzle, maybe even a confession. And deep down, I knew one thing for sure. Dad had left me more than they could ever understand. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my small apartment above the hardware store, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow, that brass key burning a hole in my pocket like it was alive. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Dad's voice, gravelly and low, saying, "Trust no one but yourself." By sunrise, when the cicadas had quieted and the town smelled faintly of fresh coffee drifting from the diner across Main Street, I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to find what this key opened. So I drove. The Silverado rattled like it always did. The dashboard clock stuck on 9:13, even though it was closer to 7 a.m. The roads were empty. Just me and the flat Texas horizon stretching wide, fields of dry grass shimmering in the heat haze even that early. My gut told me where to go. Out past the old windmill, where the dirt road curved toward the edge of our property line, there was a storage barn Dad never let Mark near. I remembered being maybe 12, following him out there once. The place smelled like dust and rusted metal. The big sliding doors chained shut. He caught me peeking and said, "Not everything's meant for your brother." Then he locked it, slipped the key into his pocket, and that was the last I ever saw of it. Until now. My palms were slick when I pulled up in front of that barn. The tin roof sagged, sunlight bouncing off it in harsh glares. Weeds grew waist-high around the sides, and a rattlesnake slithered off when my boots hit the gravel. The air smelled like hot earth and oil. My heart pounded as I pulled the brass key from my pocket. It felt heavier in the daylight, like it knew this was its moment. I slipped it into the rusty lock, and after a stubborn twist, it gave way with a click that echoed in my chest. The door groaned open, dust motes dancing in the slant of sunlight. Inside it was cooler, shadowy. Old farm equipment lined the walls, covered in tarps. The smell of hay and mouse droppings clung thick. I stepped inside. boots crunching on grit, and my eyes caught on a wooden chest shoved into the corner. My pulse jumped. It was about the size of a trunk you'd take to college, oak with iron hinges, worn smooth at the edges. A thick layer of dust coated it, except for the faint outline of a handprint, like someone had touched it not long ago. My stomach dropped. Someone else knew. I crouched down, slid the key into the small lock, and turned. It clicked open. The lid creaked as I lifted it, and the smell hit me first. Old paper, leather, a faint trace of Dad's aftershave, that sharp pine scent he always wore. Inside were folders, thick envelopes, even a stack of ledgers. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Land deeds, bank statements, letters with my name scribbled on the corners. I recognized some parcels of land he'd mentioned once or twice. But there were more, way more. It wasn't just the mansion. Dad had bought up acres all across the county, farmland, oil rights, things no one in the family ever talked about. And it was all in my hands now. I felt lightheaded, like the barn walls were closing in. Why me? Why not Mark, the golden son? That question pulsed in my head, until I saw it. An envelope marked only with the words, "For when you're ready." My chest tightened as I picked it up. The paper yellowed at the edges, the seal still intact. I didn't open it, not yet. My mind spun with possibilities. If I took this back to the family, Mark would explode. He'd try to take it all, fight me in court, drag Mom into the middle of it. But if I kept it secret, if I played it quiet, I'd be betraying them, just like Dad betrayed me for years. My hands shook as I shoved the papers back into the trunk, locked it again, and leaned against the wall, sweat dripping down my neck despite the shade. Truth is, I didn't know who I was angrier at, Dad for putting me in this position, or myself for still craving his approval even after he was gone. I stepped outside, the Texas sun blinding, and I could almost hear Mark's voice in my head, mocking me, calling me scraps. But in my pocket, that second envelope weighed heavy, reminding me I wasn't scraps. Not this time. I drove back to town with my heart pounding like I'd committed a crime. Every truck I passed felt like it could be family, spying, waiting to ask where I'd been. I parked behind my apartment, slipped upstairs, and locked the door. I set the envelope on the table, the edges glowing in the late morning light. My hands hovered over it, shaking. This was it. This was the real secret Dad had been keeping. I whispered out loud, "Am I ready?" And with that, I slid my finger under the seal. The seal tore with a soft rip, and my hand shook as I pulled out the folded pages. Dad's handwriting stretched uneven across the lines. Words pressed heavy like he'd carved them with guilt. "Son, I know this will not make sense at first, but I ask you to trust me. I gave your brother the house because that's all he ever wanted. The image, the walls, the title. But the real weight of this family was always meant for you." My chest tightened. I read faster, my eyes blurring with sweat or maybe tears. I couldn't tell. You were the one who listened, who learned, who cared for the land when no one else bothered. I saw it in your hands, the way you fixed what was broken. That's why I built something bigger for you. The deeds, the accounts, the land, they are yours. Use them wisely, not for pride but for purpose. Do not let your brother destroy what I could not finish. I sat back, the room spinning. My father, the same man who spent years overlooking me, had trusted me with everything that actually mattered. Not the house, not the showpiece, but the foundation, the future. The envelope slipped from my hands, landing on the table with a dull thud. For a long minute I just stared at it, the sound of traffic outside drifting faint through the window, the world carrying on while mine cracked open. But truth is, secrets like this don't stay hidden. By evening, word had spread. I don't know how. Maybe Mom told one of her sisters, maybe someone saw me at the barn, but Mark showed up at my apartment just as the sun was dipping low, painting the sky blood orange. He pounded on the door so hard the frame rattled. "Open up!" he barked. His voice was thick with anger, maybe whiskey too. My stomach twisted, but I opened it. Mark stormed in, boots stomping, eyes bloodshot. "You think you can steal from me?" he spat. "That land is mine. That money is mine. Dad promised me everything." I stood my ground, the letter folded in my back pocket, the key warm in my hand. "No," I said quietly. "He promised you the house. That's all he ever promised you." Mark's face twisted red and wild. "You're lying. You're always lying." He shoved me hard, my back hitting the wall. For a second I thought he might swing, but then Mom's voice cut through the tension. She was in the hallway, trembling, clutching her handbag like a shield. "Enough," she whispered. Her eyes were wet, but her voice carried steel I'd never heard before. Your father made his choice, and you, both of you, have to live with it. Mark stared at her, then at me, breathing heavy, chest heaving like a bull ready to charge, but he didn't. He cursed under his breath, slammed the door, and left me standing in the silence, my heart pounding louder than his footsteps. Mom sank into a chair, tears spilling, and for the first time she looked me straight in the eyes. He always knew you were the one who'd do right, she said softly. Her words cut deeper than Mark's shove ever could. That night I sat alone with the papers spread out on my table. The deeds, the bank statements, the letter. My life had changed just like that. But the truth is, it didn't feel like victory. It felt heavy, like a burden passed down with no instructions, just trust. And I had to decide what to do with it. I thought about Dad, about all the years I spent craving his approval, about the quiet way he'd sometimes watch me when no one else was looking. Maybe this was his way of saying he saw me all along. Maybe this was his apology. Or maybe it was just another mess he left behind for me to clean up. The mansion would always be Mark's, and maybe that was fitting. Let him have the walls, the front porch, the glory. I had something else now. Something bigger, something harder. Responsibility. When I finally stepped outside, the Texas night was cool, the cicadas humming steady. I looked up at the stars, the same sky Dad used to point out constellations under, and I felt both lost and found at once. I whispered to no one, "I'll figure it out, Dad, I'll figure it out." Because that's what sons do, even when fathers leave them with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the lesson buried in all this. Sometimes the real inheritance isn't what you hold in your hands. It's the weight you carry in your heart.